Today I'm showing you how to take some everyday pantry staples and turn them into the most delicious vegan meals. These recipes are going to be easy, but they're definitely not going to be bland, basic, or boring. So I'm not going to show you how to take a can of beans and mix it with a can of corn and a jar of salsa and just like dump it over some rice. I think we can do a little bit better than that. So instead, I'm going to show you how to transform everyday ingredients you might already have in your pantry into the most delicious meals that are so flavorful and so exciting, you could serve them at a dinner party. So this first pantry recipe is for Chana Masala. And if you're thinking, Nisha, how are we going to make a complicated Indian recipe with just pantry staples? Well, let me tell you, Chana Masala is actually usually made with just pantry ingredients, mostly pantry ingredients. You of course do need some Indian spices, but in my opinion, a well-stocked spice cabinet is essential in any healthy kitchen. So I encourage you to expand your spice collection if you haven't already done so. It's a great healthy way to add flavor to your dishes, but also all of the main spices, the essential spices in this dish can be found at most grocery stores these days, so you don't have to seek anything super exotic out. A couple other pantry staples in this recipe are onions and garlic. And technically, some people might not think of onions and garlic as pantry items, but I store them in the pantry. They have a long shelf life. I think of them as pantry staples. I think a lot of people think of them as pantry staples, so we're calling them pantry staples. We're gonna use 2 yellow onions that we're gonna dice, and then we'll use about 6 cloves of garlic that we'll mince. After you finally diced up 2 onions, start by heating a large deep frying pan with a bit of oil, and once it's hot, add some mustard seeds and cumin seeds and toast them until they start to sizzle in the pan. If you don't have mustard seeds, you can omit them. Add the diced onions and saute until they're softened and golden brown, and next add in the garlic cloves. I also usually add fresh ginger and serrano peppers at this stage, but I omitted them today since they're technically not pantry staples. Of course, if you have them at home, go ahead and use them. Then add in the ground Indian spices, garam masala, turmeric, coriander, and Indian red chili powder, and stir those into the onions for about 30 seconds. Next, we'll dump in 3 cans of chickpeas, or you could use a little over 5 cups of cooked chickpeas from scratch. Cook those undisturbed for a few minutes before you toss them so they can get a bit browned and crispy, and this will infuse them with more flavor. After that, pour in your canned tomatoes. I'm using 1 can of crushed and 1 can of diced, but you could use a larger can of either, and then season with salt, pepper, and bay leaves, and finally just a bit of water. Bring to a gentle boil and then reduce the heat and simmer for 20 to 25 minutes until you've got a really thick stew-like consistency. If you've made any of my curries or soups or stews before, you know that I like to finish them at the end with a little bit of acid, an acidic ingredient, not acid, the drug acid. Adding a little lemon juice at the end just freshens up the flavors, especially when you're making something hearty like this. Technically, a lemon, like garlic and onions, are perishable, but I feel like they're an essential ingredient in any kitchen, so I always have lemons on hand. All right, this next recipe is the most delicious pasta recipe, and it's a caramelized onion pasta inspired by the caramelized shallot pasta from Alison Roman at the New York Times. Her version has anchovies, so it's not vegan, so I wanted to create something that was just as flavorful, but 100% vegan. So to replicate those bold, salty flavors from the anchovies, all of that umami, we've got 3 vegan superstar pantry ingredients: tamari, or gluten-free soy sauce. Regular soy sauce is also fine if you're not gluten-free. Nutritional yeast, it's gonna add that cheesy mouthfeel and like the glutamate flavor. Glutamate is not a word, but I think you know what I mean. And finally, sun-dried tomatoes. They're chewy, they're delicious, they're flavorful, and they're gonna really take this pasta over the top. First, slice 2 medium yellow onions as thinly as you can and add them to a hot pan with some olive oil and season generously with salt and pepper. Typically, you caramelize onions at low heat, but that can take up to an hour, so to keep it quick, I use medium-high to high heat. The trick is to deglaze the pan every few minutes with a few tablespoons of water, picking up that sticky brown fond on the bottom of the pan. After 15 minutes, the onions should be deeply golden. Then you'll add some thinly sliced garlic cloves, reduce the heat to medium to prevent burning, and cook another 5 to 10 minutes. Season with oregano and red pepper flakes, followed by an entire tube of tomato paste. This is what brings the sauce together, and cooking it down for a few minutes caramelizes it and unleashes this amazing umami-packed concentrated tomato flavor. Finally, the 3 pantry ingredients I mentioned earlier: tamari, nutritional yeast, and chopped sun-dried tomatoes. Stir everything together until it's well combined. While the onions are caramelizing, bring a large saucepan of salted water to a boil. Cook some spaghetti until it's just al dente, but do not overcook it. And before draining, reserve at least 1 cup of the water. Over low heat, ladle in some of that cooking water to the onions and stir to thin out, but you still want it to be quite thick, almost like a tapenade, not like a marinara sauce. Add the hot pasta directly to the pan and twirl the pasta with some tongs as you go. If it's too thick, add some more pasta water as needed. This next meal is kind of a smorgasbord of Mediterranean flavors. It's kind of a mix and match meal that's great for meal prep, and you can make all of the components or just a few. The first part of the recipe is to pickle some red onions, and if that sounds too bougie or artisanal slow cooking for you, so let me show you how easy it is. To make the pickling liquid, I'm using apple cider vinegar because I always have it in my pantry. White vinegar also works. Some maple syrup, or you can use sugar, and to season, black peppercorns, salt, and red pepper flakes. Then mix in some hot water. I just heated it in a kettle, and you'll also need to very thinly slice 1 red onion. Pack the sliced onions into a glass jar and then pour the warm pickling liquid on top to cover. You can enjoy the onions once they've cooled to room temperature, but I think they're best once they've been refrigerated. While the onions are pickling, let me tell you a little bit about this dish. It's going to be kind of a Mediterranean grain bowl. The base is going to be farro. Farro is my absolute favorite grain. It's chewy in texture, nutty in taste, overall amazing. It is a gluten-containing grain, but you could use this cooking method for any kind of grain, including gluten-free grains. So use whichever grains you've got in your pantry. Bring some salted water to a boil in a saucepan and flavor it with some garlic, black pepper, and bay leaves. Add the farro and bring it to a boil, then reduce to a simmer until it's al dente and still chewy. My farro took about 20 minutes, but the exact time will depend on whether your farro is pearled or semi-pearled, so be sure to check your package instructions. The protein for this grain bowl is going to be lentils. They're a staple in my diet, so I always have at least a few varieties in my pantry. Today I've got French green lentils. These stay a little bit firm. They retain a bite, so I really like them, but if you can't find them, you can use regular green or brown lentils, and they're really easy to make, but I do want to show you how to flavor them because I want you to actually really enjoy lentils and not just think of them as some sort of like healthy food. They can be really indulgent tasting if you know how to cook them. To infuse some Mediterranean flavor into the lentils, I'm sauteing chopped garlic and cumin seeds in extra virgin olive oil, and once it's fragrant, deglaze the pan with some vegetable broth followed by the lentils. Bring the mixture to a boil, then reduce the heat to maintain a rapid simmer for 25 to 30 minutes until the lentils are al dente. Once the lentils are cooked and the liquid has evaporated, it's time to add even more flavor with some tamari or soy sauce, which brings the salty umami notes, and tahini, which makes the lentils creamy, rich, and indulgent tasting. The last thing for this meal we're going to make is hummus. To get the smoothest hummus that's not grainy, I recommend gently rubbing the chickpeas in paper towels or a clean dish towel to remove the skins. They'll slip right off, and it takes just a few extra minutes, and I'm using chickpeas cooked from scratch, which is about 1 can of chickpeas. For the tahini, you want to make sure you're using a pretty good quality one that's pretty smooth and not too bitter. I'm not using any oil in this recipe like olive oil, so it's really important to use good tahini. I'm also adding the juice of 1 medium lemon, about 3 tablespoons or so. I don't really measure it out, too lazy. We've got 2 chopped garlic cloves, and then we've got some kosher salt as well as some ground cumin. I think cumin is one of those spices that's essential in hummus. Finally, some black pepper. Blend the hummus in a food processor, and with the motor running, drizzle in a few spoons of ice water. Ice water makes the hummus extra creamy and fluffy. And now it's time to assemble the bowls with the farro, lentils, pickled onions, and hummus. There is a free PDF guide that's linked in the description box. It has all of the recipes in this video, plus my favorite pantry essentials and how I use them in my diet. And if you want even more easy yet flavorful vegan meals, I've made a short little playlist for you to watch.